The silence in the house was the first thing that truly became my enemy. It was not a peaceful silence, not the quiet hum of a home at rest. It was a hungry, predatory silence that consumed every familiar sound and left a hollow ache in its place. For 42 years, this house had been a symphony of life, a composition written by my husband, Arthur, and me. It was the sound of his heavy work boots on the hardwood floors in the morning, the cheerful whistle as he tinkered with the leaky faucet in the kitchen, the low murmur of the television as we watched our favorite old movies in the evening. Now, the symphony was over. The orchestra had packed its instruments and departed, leaving only a single, discordant note of my own breathing. 3 months. It had been 3 months since Arthur passed, but time had warped into a strange, shapeless thing. Some days felt like a single, unending moment of loss, while others flew by in a blur of gray that I could barely recall. I was Eleanor Vance, 65 years old, and for the first time in my adult life, I was utterly and completely alone. Arthur had been a man of quiet competence. His hands, calloused from a lifetime of carpentry and care, could fix anything. A rattling window, a sputtering engine, a child's broken heart. He moved through the world with a calm certainty that I had always leaned on, a steady lighthouse in the fog of my own anxieties. The house was a testament to his handiwork. The bookshelves he built in the study, the porch swing he assembled for our 25th anniversary, the meticulously organized workshop in the garage that I hadn't dared to touch. Every corner held an echo of him. I would walk into the kitchen and expect to see him at the table, reading the morning paper with his glasses perched on the end of his nose. I'd catch a scent of his aftershave lingering in the bathroom, and my heart would perform a painful, foolish leap of hope before crashing back into the cold reality. The grief was a physical presence, a heavy cloak I could not shrug off. It muted colors, dulled the taste of food, and made sleep a fleeting, unreliable visitor. My son, Marcus, had been a comfort in the first few days. He and his wife, Tiffany, had handled the funeral arrangements with a brisk efficiency that I was grateful for at the time. They sorted through paperwork, answered phone calls, and ensured a steady supply of casseroles from well-meaning neighbors appeared on my doorstep. But their grief felt different from mine. It was an event to be managed, a task to be completed. After the funeral, their visits became shorter, their calls less frequent. Marcus was a busy man, 42 years old with a demanding job and a life of his own. I understood that. I had raised him to be independent, to build his own world. But a part of me, the selfish, motherly part, ached for him to see the chasm that had opened in my life, to sit with me in the silence and simply be present. Tiffany, whom he had been married to for 5 years, was always polite, her smile perfectly in place, but her eyes had a way of scanning the room, assessing the furniture, the paintings, the value of a life's collection. I told myself I was being uncharitable, that grief was making me suspicious. I pushed the feeling down. One Tuesday morning, the silence became unbearable. The grandfather clock in the hall, a wedding gift from my parents nearly 50 years ago, no longer chimed the hours. It counted them, each tick a leaden drop into the vast, silent pool of my grief. I was sitting at the kitchen table, staring into a cold cup of coffee, when Arthur's voice echoed in my mind, as clear as if he were standing beside me. "Ellie," he used to say, his voice a low, gentle rumble, "the world doesn't stop for anyone's sorrow. You have to meet it halfway." He was a pragmatist, my Arthur. He believed in forward motion. He believed that as long as there was breath in your lungs, there was a reason to put one foot in front of the other. And in that moment, staring at the dust motes dancing in the sunbeam slicing through the window, I knew he was right. I could not let this house become my tomb. I could not honor the vibrant life he had lived by simply ceasing to live my own. The decision, when it came, felt like the first ray of sun after a long winter. I needed to move. I needed freedom. I needed a car. The old gray sedan that Arthur had kept running through sheer force of will had finally given up the ghost a week after the funeral. The mechanic had shaken his head sadly, telling me the cost of repairs would be more than the car was worth. It felt like a final, symbolic severance. That car was part of our shared life, and it had died with him. Now, I needed something that was just mine. With the life insurance funds and the savings we had carefully accumulated over 4 decades, I knew I could afford something modest, something reliable. It wasn't about luxury. It was about reclaiming a piece of my independence. It was about meeting the world halfway. Walking into the car dealership felt like stepping into another world. It was bright, loud, and smelled of polish and possibility. A young salesman named Devin Williams approached me, his smile genuine and kind. He didn't treat me like a confused old woman. He listened patiently as I explained what I was looking for: safety, reliability, ease of use. He showed me several models, and then I saw it. It was a sleek silver sedan, a model they called the Starlight. It seemed an absurdly hopeful name for a car I was buying to outrun ghosts, but it caught the showroom lights in a way that felt like a promise. It was compact, elegant, and looked wonderfully manageable. Devin opened the door for me, and as I slid into the driver's seat, the scent of new upholstery filled my senses. I ran my hand over the smooth steering wheel. For the first time in 3 months, a feeling stirred within me that was not grief or emptiness. It was a flicker of hope. Devin explained the features with a quiet enthusiasm, pointing out the advanced braking system, the comprehensive airbag coverage, the impressive fuel efficiency. When he mentioned the price, $8,500, a wave of relief washed over me. It was a significant amount, but it was manageable. It was my money, our money, earned through years of hard work and careful planning for a future Arthur would never see, but one that I was now determined to live. I signed the paperwork that day. The car was registered in my name only. Eleanor Vance, sole owner. The words on the page looked so stark, so definitive. Driving away from the dealership, the engine purring softly beneath me, I began to cry. They were not just tears of sadness for the man who wasn't in the passenger seat beside me. They were tears of joy, of release. It was the first decisive step I had taken for myself since the world had fallen apart. The afternoon sun streamed through the windshield, and I knew with a certainty that settled deep in my bones that Arthur would have been proud. This was what he would have wanted. When I arrived home, I parked the car in the driveway, right in front of the house. I just sat there for a few minutes, admiring it. The silver paint gleamed. It was more than a machine of metal and glass. It was a symbol. It was my fresh start. I took the keys inside and placed them on the kitchen counter, their metallic clink, a small, defiant sound against the oppressive silence. My first instinct was to share the news, and my first thought was of Marcus. I wanted him to see this. I wanted him to know that his mother was not fading away, that I was fighting, that I was choosing life. I dialed his number, my heart beating with a nervous excitement. He didn't answer, so it went to his voicemail. "Honey, it's Mom," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I did something exciting today. I bought a new car. It's so lovely. Come over when you have a chance. I'd love for you to see it. I love you." I hung up the phone, a genuine smile on my face. I imagined his surprise, his happiness for me. I pictured him coming over, inspecting the car with the same serious expression he'd had as a boy examining a new toy. I expected him to understand how much this meant, this small but significant step out of the darkness. I had no idea that this simple act of reclaiming my life was about to set in motion a betrayal so profound it would shatter the world I had left. I had no idea that the next morning, my own son would walk through my door and try to take everything from me. I went to bed that night feeling a fragile sense of accomplishment, completely unaware that the real storm was not behind me, but waiting just beyond the dawn. The following morning, I awoke with a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in years. The sun was just beginning to cast its pale golden light across the bedroom floor, and for the first time since Arthur's passing, the silence of the house did not feel like a threat. It felt like a blank canvas. I had plans for the day, simple plans, but they were mine. I would go to the supermarket and buy fresh flowers for the dining table. Then, I would drive to my friend Serena's house. I hadn't seen her in weeks, and I couldn't wait to show her the car and see the surprise on her face. And finally, if I felt brave enough, I would drive to the cemetery. It might sound foolish to some, talking to a headstone, but it was my way of keeping Arthur close, of sharing my life with him still. I wanted to tell him about the silver sedan, about the flicker of hope. I wanted him to know I was keeping my promise to keep moving forward. I was in the kitchen, savoring the rich aroma of my second cup of coffee, when the sound of a car pulling into the driveway broke the morning's quiet rhythm. I peered through the kitchen window, and my heart gave a joyful leap. It was Marcus's SUV. He had received my message. He had come to see me, to share in my small victory. A wide smile spread across my face as I hurried to the front door, my mind already rehearsing how I would describe the smooth ride and the wonderful new car smell. I swung the door open, my greeting ready on my lips, but the words died in my throat. The smile on my face froze, then crumbled. Marcus was not alone. Standing beside him on the porch was his wife, Tiffany. And neither of them was smiling. Their expressions were a matched set of grim resolution, their posture rigid. They looked at me not with the warmth of family, but with the detached appraisal of surgeons diagnosing a problem that needed to be excised. A cold knot of dread began to form in the pit of my stomach. "Hi, sweetie," I managed, my voice sounding unnaturally bright. "Tiffany, what a lovely surprise to see you both so early. Come in, come in. I've just brewed a fresh pot of coffee." Marcus bypassed my greeting entirely, his determined strides carrying him directly past me and toward the kitchen as if on a mission. Tiffany followed in his wake, giving me a brief, unreadable glance that held no warmth at all. I closed the door slowly, the earlier joy evaporating like mist in a harsh Sunday. Something was terribly wrong. I followed them into the kitchen, the knot in my stomach tightening with each step. Marcus had stopped in front of the counter, his gaze fixed on the single object I had placed there with such pride. The keys to my new car. He picked them up, the silver fob and single key resting in his large palm. He weighed them in his hand, his expression unreadable, as if he were calculating not just their physical weight, but their symbolic importance. "Mom," he said finally, his voice flat, his eyes still focused on the keys. "We need to talk." I crossed my arms over my chest, a defensive gesture I didn't even realize I was making. The alarm bells in my head were no longer ringing, they were screaming. "Of course, honey. What is it?" He finally lifted his gaze to meet mine, but not before exchanging a quick, significant look with Tiffany. She gave him a subtle, almost imperceptible nod, a silent granting of permission. And then my son, the boy I had raised, the man I had loved unconditionally, began to dismantle my world. "Mom, I heard your message. You bought a car, a new one." His tone was not celebratory. It was accusatory. "I did," I replied, a tremor of my earlier excitement still trying to break through my growing fear. "That's why I called. It's a beautiful car, Marcus. Driving it makes me feel free." "You don't need it," he interrupted, the three words dropping into the quiet kitchen like stones into a still pond. The air rippled with their cold finality. I stared at him, my mind struggling to process the statement. It made no sense. "What?" I whispered, the word barely audible. Marcus finally looked me directly in the eye, and what I saw there chilled me to the bone. It was not concern. It was impatience. "You don't need a car, Mom. Not at your age. Your reflexes aren't what they used to be. It's a safety hazard. And besides," he continued, his voice gaining a lecturing tone, "it's an unnecessary expense. The insurance, the maintenance, the price of gas, what's the point?" I felt as if he had slapped me. The reasons he listed were so condescending, so dismissive of my competence. "Marcus, I drive perfectly well. My license is up to date, and I passed the vision test with no issues. And it's my money. It was my decision to make." He shook his head slowly, a weary sigh escaping his lips, the kind one reserves for a stubborn, irrational child. "Mom, you're not hearing me. This isn't about your driving. It's about being practical. Look, Tiffany and I have been talking. We have that family trip with her parents tomorrow, the one we've been planning for months. Our car has been acting up, making a strange noise. It's not reliable for a long drive. Yours is brand new. It's perfect." A horrifying realization began to dawn, a conclusion so monstrous I could barely let myself form the thought. "Wait," I said, holding up a hand as if to physically stop his words. "Are you telling me you came here to borrow my new car, the day after I bought it?" Marcus let out a short, humorless laugh. "I didn't come here to ask for anything, Mom." His hand, which had been loosely holding the keys, tightened into a fist, enclosing them completely. "I came to tell you, I'm taking it." The world seemed to tilt on its axis. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. "No," I gasped, the sound a strangled cry. "Marcus, you can't. Those are my keys. That is my car." But he was already turning, walking toward the door, his back to me. Tiffany followed him, her face a mask of indifference, completely ignoring my plea. I stumbled after them, my legs feeling weak beneath me. "Marcus, stop. You cannot do this. Give me back my keys." He paused at the threshold of the front door and turned to face me. The look in his eyes was the one that would haunt my sleepless nights for a long time to come. There was no love there, no respect, no trace of the son I had rocked to sleep and whose scraped knees I had bandaged. There was only a cold, hard contempt. "Mom, enough with the drama," he said, and the voice was his, but the cruel detachment was alien. "You don't need this car. You don't need any of this." He gestured vaguely around at the house, at the life Arthur and I had built. "You're rattling around in this huge house all by yourself, clinging to ghosts. It's not healthy. It's not safe." "What? What are you saying?" I whispered, my voice trembling so hard I could barely form the words. "Tiffany and I have been discussing it," he went on, his voice relentless, a hammer chipping away at my very foundation. "And we've decided it would be for the best if you started looking at more appropriate living arrangements, an assisted living facility. There are some excellent ones just outside the city. You'd be cared for. You'd have people your own age to talk to. You wouldn't have to worry about a thing." He delivered the next line with a chilling practicality that shattered the last vestiges of my composure. "In fact, since we're heading out of town tomorrow anyway, I can drop you off at 1 on our way." The air left my lungs. My son was not just stealing my car, he was stealing my home, my life, my autonomy. He was telling me I was no longer a person but a problem to be managed, a piece of furniture to be moved and stored. "Marcus," I said, my voice breaking, "I don't need a facility. I am perfectly fine here. This is my home." He sighed again, that same exasperated sound. "Mom, don't make this more difficult than it needs to be. We're taking the car. We'll be gone for about a week. When we get back, we can have a calm discussion about your future." And with that, he turned and walked out the door, Tiffany gliding silently behind him. I ran onto the porch, the cool morning air a shock against my tear-streaked face. "Marcus, no please. That car is mine. I bought it with my own money, our money. You can't just take it." But he was already beside the gleaming silver sedan, my symbol of freedom. He clicked the remote, and the car chirped in response, a sound of cheerful obedience that felt like a profound betrayal. "Marcus, I am begging you," I shouted, my voice raw with desperation. "Don't do this to me. I am your mother." He paused for a single, fleeting second, his hand on the car door. For that one heartbeat, I saw a flicker of something in his eyes, doubt, maybe even shame. I clung to that flicker, praying it would grow into a flame of conscience. I thought he would remember who I was, everything I had done for him, the unconditional love I had poured into him for 42 years. But then the flicker was gone, extinguished as quickly as it had appeared. He got into the car, started the engine that I had so loved the sound of, and without a backward glance, he drove away. Tiffany sat in the passenger seat, her head turned away from me, as if I were a distasteful sight on the side of the road. I stood alone in the middle of my own driveway, watching my new car, my hope, my fresh start, disappear down the street, carrying my son and my dignity away with it. The tears fell freely now, hot and heavy. My body shook with a grief that was sharper and more violent than anything I had felt even when Arthur died. That had been a loss to the cruelties of nature and time. This was a deliberate act of cruelty. This was a theft of the soul. I stumbled back into the house, the silence rushing in to greet me, no longer empty, but filled with the mocking echoes of my son's words. I sank onto the living room sofa, the same sofa where Arthur and I had spent countless evenings, and I cried. I cried for the loss of a car, yes, but that was the smallest part of it. I cried for the brutal betrayal, and most of all, I cried for the son I realized I had just lost forever. I don't know how long I sat there, adrift in an ocean of sorrow. Time had ceased to have any meaning. All that existed was the profound, hollow ache in my chest, the feeling of something essential having been shattered beyond repair. It was the sacred trust between a mother and her child. It was the naive belief that the love you give will be the love you receive. It was the image of the man I thought I had raised. But then, in the deepest part of that emotional darkness, something shifted. It began as a tiny spark in the ashes of my despair. The tears slowed, then stopped. I wiped my wet cheeks with the back of my hand, and I felt a new emotion beginning to uncoil in my chest. It was not sadness. It was not helplessness. It was fury. A cold, clear, calculating rage began to flow through my veins, washing away the pain and leaving behind a bedrock of pure, unyielding resolve. Because as I sat there, surrounded by the ghosts of my past, I remembered something. I remembered something vital, something Marcus, in his arrogant dismissal of me, could never have imagined. I was not a fragile, foolish old woman. I was Eleanor Vance. I had lived 65 years on this earth. I had raised a son largely on my own while my husband worked 16-hour days to build us a life. I had managed a household, balanced a budget, navigated illnesses, and shouldered burdens that would have crushed a lesser person. And through all those years, I had learned one fundamental, unshakable lesson. You must always be prepared. You always need a backup plan. When I walked into that dealership and signed the papers for my car, I was not just acting on a whim of hope. I was acting with the caution of a lifetime. Even as I wanted to believe in the goodness of my son, even as I prayed I was wrong, I had seen the signs. I had noticed the small, almost imperceptible signals that I had tried so desperately to ignore because acknowledging them was too painful. There was the way Tiffany's eyes would sweep over my home, not with admiration but with calculation. There was the way Marcus had casually asked about the details of his father's life insurance policy. His questions about my savings, my pension, my plans for the house, they were always couched in feigned concern, questions that, in retrospect, were not casual at all. They were reconnaissance. So, after I signed the ownership papers for the Starlight sedan, I had made one more stop before going home. It was a stop that, at the time, felt like an overreaction, a surrender to a paranoia I was ashamed to admit I felt. But now, sitting in my violated home, I thanked God for that paranoia. I had driven to the downtown office of Walter Pierce. Walter had been Arthur's closest friend for over 30 years, and he was the sharpest attorney I had ever known. He was a man of quiet integrity, his office a sanctuary of dark wood, leather-bound books, and sober judgment. I sat across from his large mahogany desk and told him everything. I told him about buying the car, a symbol of my new life. And then, my voice faltering with shame, I told him about my fears, my concerns about Marcus and Tiffany, my feeling that they saw me not as a mother, but as a collection of assets waiting to be liquidated. Walter did not judge me. He did not tell me I was being ridiculous or overly suspicious. He simply listened, his steepled fingers resting on his chin, his gaze kind but serious. When I had finished, he leaned forward. "Ellie," he said, his voice calm and reassuring, "in my line of work, I have learned that if your gut tells you something is wrong, it is almost always right. Prevention is not mistrust. It is wisdom." And then, he helped me. Over the next hour, he helped me forge an arsenal. He helped me prepare a series of legal documents that would protect my interests, my property, and my dignity. Documents that made it unequivocally clear who was in charge of my life. The first was a notarized letter, drafted on his official firm letterhead, carrying the full and intimidating weight of the law. The letter stated in clear, unambiguous terms that the silver Starlight sedan, with its specific vehicle identification number, was registered solely in my name, Eleanor Vance. It stipulated that any person operating the vehicle without my explicit, written, and notarized permission would be considered to be in illegal possession of stolen property. It went on to name the specific criminal charge: grand theft auto, a felony offense in our state. The letter concluded by stating that I, as the legal owner, reserved the absolute right to file a criminal complaint with the police at any time. To bolster this, Walter attached certified copies of the car's title, the official vehicle registration, and my valid driver's license, all irrefutable proof of my ownership and my legal capacity to operate a motor vehicle. But we did not stop there. Walter, with his keen, strategic mind, knew that the car was merely a symptom of a larger problem. The true threat was their attempt to control my life by declaring me incompetent. So, he prepared a second document, a sworn and notarized affidavit. In it, I formally declared that I was of sound mind and body, in full control of my mental faculties, and that I was not under any duress or manipulation. The affidavit explicitly stated that any attempt by any party, including family members, to have me declared legally incompetent or to force me into an assisted living facility against my expressed will would be considered an act of elder abuse under state law and would be contested with the full force of his legal firm. To this, Walter attached a copy of a full medical examination I had undergone just 1 month prior, a report that confirmed I was in excellent physical and mental health for a woman of my age. Finally, we prepared one last document. This one was the most painful. It felt like a betrayal in itself, a preemptive strike against my own heart, but Walter and I both knew it was necessary. He helped me draft a formal amendment to my last will and testament. In the original will, written years ago with Arthur, Marcus was our sole heir. Everything the house, our savings, our investments was to pass to him. It was a natural, loving inheritance. But after seeing the greed in Tiffany's eyes, after hearing the calculation in my son's questions, I had to protect Arthur's legacy from their avarice. In the new, legally binding codicil, I removed Marcus completely as a beneficiary. It was not an act of punishment, I explained to Walter, my voice thick with unshed tears. It was an act of protection. If they were to succeed in their plans, I could not bear the thought of them profiting from it. The new will redirected my entire estate to a collection of charities I had chosen with care, an organization that provided legal aid to senior citizens, a local animal shelter Arthur had always supported, and a scholarship fund for underprivileged students. Walter made a certified copy of this newly amended will and included it in the package. When we were finished, Walter placed the entire collection of documents, the legal arsenal, into a large, sturdy manila envelope. He looked at me, his expression a mixture of sympathy and admiration. "This is your insurance policy, Ellie," he said softly. "I hope with all my heart that you never have to use it, but if you do, it will be there for you." I took the envelope, its weight feeling substantial in my hands. That evening, before I called Marcus, before I invited the serpent into my garden, I had walked out to my new car. I opened the passenger side door, and I placed that manila envelope into the glove box. As I clicked it shut, a part of me prayed that I was a foolish, paranoid old woman, that the documents would gather dust in there forever, a testament to an unfounded fear. But another part of me, the wiser, sadder part that had seen the subtle shifts in my son's character, knew that I had just armed myself for a war I never wanted to fight. Now, sitting on my sofa, the echoes of betrayal still ringing in my ears, I smiled. It was a bitter, grim smile, but it was a smile of power. Marcus thought he had left a broken victim in his wake. He had no idea he had just awakened a warrior. He thought I was weak. He thought I was finished. He had looked at me and seen only a relic of the past, a sentimental old woman to be managed and discarded. He had made the gravest mistake of his life. He had profoundly, catastrophically underestimated his mother. I rose from the sofa, my movements no longer shaky or uncertain. I walked to the kitchen, poured myself a tall glass of cold water, and drank it down in long, slow swallows. The cold liquid felt like a shock to my system, extinguishing the last embers of my weeping and solidifying my rage into something hard and clear like diamond. My mind was now a calm, quiet place. The emotional storm had passed, and what remained was a landscape of icy clarity. I knew exactly what I needed to do. I picked up my cell phone from the counter where I had left it after my unanswered call to Marcus. I imagined them on the highway, my silver car eating up the miles, taking them further away from their crime. They would be heading to Tiffany's parents' house, a 3-hour drive across the state line. I could picture the scene inside my car so vividly it made my stomach clench. Tiffany would be in the passenger seat, likely scrolling through her phone, a smug smile on her face. Marcus would be driving, perhaps with a knot of guilt in his stomach, but he would be pushing it down, justifying his actions to himself. They were probably celebrating, laughing about how easy it had been, how their little problem of needing a new car for their trip had been so elegantly solved. Tiffany was probably remarking on how pathetic I was, how I had cried and begged, reinforcing their narrative of me as a helpless, hysterical old woman who needed to be put away for her own good. I opened my messaging application and navigated to my conversation with Marcus. My fingers, which had been trembling with grief just moments before, were now perfectly steady as they moved over the screen. There was no fear, no hesitation. There was only the cold, sharp anticipation of a chess master about to make a decisive move. I knew the power of the words I was about to type. I knew the devastating impact they would have. And while a small, deeply buried part of me, the part that would always be a mother, felt a pang of sorrow for the blow I was about to deliver, the larger part of me, The woman who had been robbed and humiliated, the woman who deserved dignity and respect, knew it was not just necessary, it was righteous. I typed 3 words, just 3. They were short, direct, and utterly devoid of emotion. But they were charged with a legal and emotional weight that Marcus could not yet begin to comprehend. Check the glove box. That was all. I added no explanation, no threat, no plea. I did not call him a monster. I did not tell him he had broken my heart. I let the words stand alone, stark and mysterious. I pressed the send button. The message icon showed it was delivered. And a moment later, the status changed to read. I imagined the scene. The notification sound on his phone. Tiffany, annoyed, asking who was texting him. Marcus glancing at the screen, his brow furrowed in confusion at the cryptic message from the mother he had just abandoned. Check the glove box. What could that possibly mean? I placed the phone on the kitchen table and sat down, my back straight, my hands folded calmly in my lap. I waited. My heart was beating, not with anxiety, but with a strong, steady rhythm, like a drum beating for a battle about to begin. I had cast the stone into the water, and I knew the ripples would soon become a tidal wave. 5 minutes passed. They felt like an eternity. Then 10. My phone remained silent. I pictured him driving, perhaps arguing with Tiffany about whether to stop. She would tell him to ignore it, that it was just another one of my dramatic attempts to get attention. He, on the other hand, would be consumed by a nagging curiosity, a sliver of unease. Then, my phone vibrated, the buzz against the wooden table startlingly loud in the quiet room. It was Marcus. He was calling. I looked at his name on the screen, and a cold satisfaction washed over me. I let it ring, and ring, and ring, until it finally went to his voicemail. A second later, he called again. I ignored it. He called a 3rd time, a 4th, and a 5th, each call more frantic than the last. I denied them all. I wanted him to feel it. That rising panic. That icy grip of powerlessness. The slow, dawning, terrible realization that he was no longer in control of this situation. Finally, the calls stopped. A text message appeared. Mom, what is this? What does this envelope mean? Call me. Please. I read the message and set the phone down without replying. A minute later, another message arrived. Mom, this is a huge mistake. We need to talk. I'm pulling over. Please call me. Again, I did not reply. I let the silence stretch, letting his imagination do the work for me. I wanted him to read every single word in that envelope. I wanted him to feel the legal weight of each document settling upon his shoulders. And then, the message I had been waiting for arrived. It was the one that confirmed he had understood. He had read the lawyer's letter. He had seen the amended will. He had finally grasped the sheer magnitude of his transgression. The message read, Mom, please don't do this. It was a terrible mistake. I am so sorry. We can fix this. Please don't call the police. I'm begging you. I read his words, and I could feel the terror bleeding through the screen. I could sense the abject panic that had seized him. Grand theft auto, elder abuse, disinheritance. These were not abstract concepts anymore. They were real, and they were aimed directly at him. And while the mother in me felt a flicker of pain at his desperation, the woman he had wronged felt a profound sense of vindication. Now he knew. Now he understood. I let another 10 agonizing minutes pass. I wanted him to sit in that car on the side of some lonely highway and truly contemplate the ruin he had brought upon himself. I wanted every second of my silence to be a hammer blow against his arrogance. Finally, I picked up the phone and typed my reply. It was as terse and direct as my first message. Return the car to my driveway. Now. His response was instantaneous. I am 3 hours away. I am turning around right now. I will be there as soon as I possibly can. I promise, Mom. Please, just don't do anything. Until I get there. I placed the phone back on the table, the screen dark. I leaned back in my chair, the tension in my shoulders releasing for the first time all day. It was not a feeling of joy. There could be no joy in a victory won against your own child. but it was something akin to justice. It was the deep, resonant satisfaction of equilibrium being restored to the universe. For my entire life, I had played the part of the gentle, forgiving, understanding mother. I had absorbed disappointments, overlooked slights, and always given the benefit of the doubt. And in the end, that gentle understanding had been mistaken for weakness. I had been treated like a doormat, an obstacle, a thing to be disposed of. That ended today. I walked to my bedroom and stood before the full-length mirror on the closet door. I saw a woman of 65, with lines of worry and laughter etched around her eyes. I saw the silver threads woven into her hair and the hands that had baked 1,000 cookies, signed 1,000,000 permission slips, and wiped away countless tears. But today, I saw something else in her eyes. I saw a glint of steel. I saw a strength I had forgotten I possessed. Arthur had always told me, "Ellie, you are tougher than you think you are. You're like an oak tree. You bend, but you never break." I wish he could have seen me in that moment. I wish he could have seen his wife reclaiming her own strength. He would have been proud. I opened my closet and pushed past the sensible cardigans and comfortable slacks I usually wore. I reached for a dress I hadn't worn in years, a beautiful emerald green dress that Arthur had bought me for our 40th anniversary. It was a color, he said, matched my eyes. I put it on. I brushed my hair until it shone. I applied a touch of lipstick. If I was going to face my son, if I was going to have this final defining confrontation, I would not do it as the weeping, broken woman he had left behind. I would face him as Eleanor Vance, a woman in full command of herself and her life. While I waited for the 3 longest hours of my life to pass, I made a call. I dialed Walter Pierce. He needed to be aware of the situation. He answered on the second ring, his voice the epitome of calm professionalism. "Ellie, is everything all right?" "It happened, Walter," I said, my own voice steady and clear. "Just as we feared. My son took the car. He has found the documents, and he is on his way back now." There was a brief pause on the other end of the line, followed by a heavy sigh. "I am so sorry to hear that, Ellie. I am sorry you were right." "No one ever wants to be right about something like this," I replied quietly. "But here we are. I need to know what happens next, legally." Walter explained the situation with his usual precision. Marcus had, in fact, committed a felony. The moment he drove that car off my property without my consent, he had broken the law. Family relation did not change the legal facts. I had every right to go to the police and file a report, and the district attorney would have a very strong case. However, I also had the right not to press charges. The decision, he stressed, was entirely mine. The power was in my hands. The important thing, he said, was that Marcus now understood that I possessed that power. "I want to talk to him first," I told Walter, "when he arrives. But I need to know you are available by phone, just in case things go badly." "Of course," he replied without hesitation. "My phone will not leave my side. Call me for anything at all. And Ellie," he added, his voice softening with the warmth of his long friendship with my husband, "you are doing the right thing. You are a brave woman. Don't you ever let anyone, especially your own son, make you doubt that." His words were a balm to my bruised soul. "Thank you, Walter, for everything." I hung up the phone feeling fortified, ready for the final act of this terrible drama. The hours crawled by. Each minute felt like a milestone. I made a pot of tea, not because I wanted it, but because the simple ritual of boiling water and preparing the cup gave my hands something to do. As the steam rose from the porcelain, my mind drifted back through the years. I thought of all the sacrifices I had made for Marcus, the sleepless nights when he was a colicky baby, the summers I worked a second job as a seamstress to pay for the expensive summer camps he wanted to attend, the time I sold a pearl necklace my own mother had left me to help him with a down payment on his first apartment. Mothers do these things. We give pieces of ourselves away, freely and with love, never keeping a tally, never expecting anything in return but love and respect. And I thought about Tiffany. I remembered how she had entered our lives 5 years ago, a whirlwind of fashionable clothes and bright, brittle smiles. From the very beginning, there had been something about her that set my teeth on edge. A coolness in her eyes, a transactional quality to her affection. My husband, Arthur, with his uncanny ability to read people, had seen it immediately. "There's something about that girl I don't trust, Ellie," he had confessed to me one night. I think she sees Marcus not as a partner, but as an investment. I had defended her, of course. I had told him he was being overprotective, that Marcus was in love, but Arthur had been right. He had always been right about people. After Arthur's death, Tiffany's subtle avarice had become bolder. Her questions about my finances grew more direct. Her suggestions that I sell the house and downsize became more insistent. And Marcus, my son, began to parrot her words, his voice infused with her logic. They had become a team, and I was the project they needed to manage, the estate they were planning to liquidate. The tea in my cup grew cold, untouched. The clock on the wall ticked on, a steady, implacable rhythm counting down to the confrontation. At 4:30, my phone buzzed with a new message from Marcus. 20 minutes out. Please, Mom. We really need to talk. I read it and set the phone down. I smoothed the fabric of my green dress, took a deep, steadying breath, and prepared myself. At precisely 10 minutes to 5, I heard it. The familiar, soft purr of my Starlight sedan's engine as it turned into the driveway. I moved to the living room window and peered through the curtains. Marcus was behind the wheel. He looked pale and haggard, his face etched with stress. Tiffany was not in the passenger seat. That was interesting. Perhaps he had dropped her off at her parents' house after all. Or, more likely, she had not wanted to face the consequences of their failed little coup. Marcus switched off the engine but didn't get out of the car immediately. He sat there for a long moment, his head bowed, his hands gripping the steering wheel. I could see his shoulders shaking slightly. Then he reached over to the passenger seat and picked up the large manila envelope. Finally, he opened the car door and got out, his movements slow and heavy, as if each step cost him a monumental effort. He walked up the path to my front door. He did not use his own key. He rang the doorbell, a short, hesitant chime. I waited a full 10 seconds before moving, letting him stand there on the porch, in the space where he had so recently broken my heart. When I finally opened the door, our eyes met. His were red-rimmed and swollen. He had been crying. Good, I thought, with a coldness that surprised me. Now you know a fraction of how it feels. Mom, he began, his voice choked and hoarse. I held up a hand, cutting him off. Inside, I said, my voice as cold and hard as slate. We will have this conversation inside, not on the porch for the whole neighborhood to witness. He nodded meekly and walked past me into the foyer. He clutched the manila envelope in one hand and my car keys in the other. I led him in silence to the living room, the same room where I had collapsed in tears only hours before. But I was not the same woman now. Now, I was in command. I gestured to the sofa. Sit down, Marcus. He obeyed without a word, sinking into the cushions like a scolded child. I did not sit beside him. I took the armchair opposite, the one that had always been his father's chair. I created a space between us, a formal, unbridgeable distance. He placed the envelope and my keys on the coffee table that separated us. The metallic clink of the keys sounded unnaturally loud in the tense silence. I read everything, he said at last, his voice barely a whisper. Mom, I had no idea. I didn't know you had all of this prepared. I leaned forward slightly, my gaze unwavering. And how exactly does that change anything, Marcus? Does the fact that you thought you would get away with it make what you did acceptable? He shook his head vigorously, his eyes wide with panic. No, of course not. What I did, it was unforgivable. It was monstrous. I know that now. Then tell me, I said, my voice dangerously soft. Tell me what you did that was so monstrous. I want to hear you say the words. He swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing in his throat. I stole your car. I committed a crime. And I said horrible, cruel things to you. About the assisted living facility. I don't know what I was thinking. Oh, but you were thinking, Marcus, I interrupted, my voice sharp as broken glass. You were thinking that your mother was a senile old fool you could bully. You were thinking you could treat me like a piece of garbage, and I would just take it. You were thinking that your wants were more important than my rights. Oh, he broke down then, sobbing openly, his face crumpling like a child's. No, Mom, no, I swear. I love you. You're my mother. It's just, Tiffany said. She thought. He stopped abruptly, the admission hanging in the air between us, a confession of his own weakness. Ah, I said, leaning back in the armchair, a grim understanding dawning. So, this was Tiffany's idea. Of course it was. It always is, isn't it, Marcus? Tell me, what are you? A 42-year-old man who is so terrified of his wife that he would rather betray his own mother than stand up to her? He looked up, a flash of his old pride surfacing. It's not like that, Mom. Then what is it like? I challenged him, my voice rising. Why did you come into my home, steal my property, and tell me I should be locked away in a home? Those were your words, Marcus. They came out of your mouth. Not Tiffany's. Yours. He dropped his head into his hands, his shoulders shaking with silent sobs. It was a long time before he could speak. And when he did, his voice was a ragged whisper, filled with a shame that was, for the first time, utterly convincing. You're right, he said. You're completely right. There is no excuse. There is nothing I can say to defend what I did. I can only say that I am sorry, that I made the biggest mistake of my life, and that if you give me the chance, I will spend the rest of my days trying to make it up to you. A mistake? I repeated, the word tasting like poison on my tongue. You call this a mistake? A mistake is forgetting to take out the trash, Marcus. A mistake is buying the wrong kind of milk. What you did was not a mistake. It was a deliberate, calculated act of cruelty. You and your wife planned this. You came here with the intention of taking what was mine. And not just the car, I said, my voice dropping as I leaned forward again, pinning him with my gaze. You wanted to take my freedom, my independence, my home, my right to live my own life. You wanted to pack me away in a facility and forget about me so you and Tiffany could have all of this. I swept my hand around the room, indicating the house and everything in it. Mom, please, he begged, his voice cracking. Please let me fix this. I'll do anything. I swear I'll do anything you ask. Anything, I asked, my voice laced with ice. All right then, let's start with this. Where is Tiffany? He flinched as if I had struck him. He wouldn't meet my eyes. I left her at her parents' house. When she read the documents, when she realized you could actually send me to prison, that you had cut me out of the will, she got angry. She said I was a fool. She said I had ruined everything. Ah, I nodded slowly. So she wasn't angry that you had hurt your mother. She was angry that you had failed to secure the inheritance. His silence was the only answer I needed. I stood up and walked over to the window, turning my back on him. I looked out at my silver car, gleaming in the late afternoon sun, a silent witness to the day's betrayals and reckonings. I need you to understand something, Marcus, I said, my voice measured and calm, the voice of a woman who had passed through the fire and had been forged into something new. I raised you. Your father worked 16-hour days, 6 days a week, so that you would never have to know the kind of hardship he did, which means I was the one who was here. I was the one who fed you, bathed you, and stayed up all night when you had a fever. I was the one who went to every parent-teacher conference, every school play, every soccer game. I was the one who taught you how to read, how to ride a bike, how to be a good person. My voice cracked slightly on the last words, but I pressed on. When you decided you wanted to study music, a path your father and I both knew would be difficult, I supported you. I sold my own mother's jewelry, heirlooms I had treasured, to help pay for your tuition, because your dreams were more important to me than my possessions. That is what mothers do, Marcus. They sacrifice. They give. I know, Mom, he sobbed from the couch. I know, and I have been a terrible, ungrateful son. And when your father died, I continued, turning to face him again, when my world collapsed, when I was so lost I could barely get out of bed in the morning, where were you? You came for the funeral, you stayed for 2 days, and then you vanished back into your own life, leaving me alone in this cavern of a house to navigate my grief by myself. That's not fair, he protested weakly. I had to get back to work. I have responsibilities. We all have responsibilities, Marcus, I countered, my voice sharp. But our primary responsibility is to the people we love. And I was not asking you to abandon your life. I was asking for a phone call, a visit on a Sunday, a simple question, how are you holding up, Mom? But for 3 months, there was mostly silence. Until I called you with a piece of good news, and you saw it not as a cause for celebration, but as an opportunity. You came here to steal from me. He covered his face with his hands, his shoulders shaking. I'm a monster, he whispered into his palms. You are not a monster, I said, and the words were true. You are a weak man, a man who has made terrible choices, A man who has allowed himself to be poisoned by the greed of another person. A man who has forgotten who he is and where he came from, but the question is, can that man change? He looked up, his face a mess of tears and remorse, his eyes pleading. Yes. I swear I want to. I will do anything. Tell me what I have to do. First, I said, my voice firm, leaving no room for negotiation, you must make a choice. You need to decide what is more important in your life, your wife's greed or your mother's love, because I am making one thing perfectly and irrevocably clear to you right now. As long as you are with that woman, as long as she has this venomous influence over you, I cannot have you in my life. I cannot trust you. You can't ask me to choose, he whispered, aghast. She's my wife. She is your wife, I agreed. And I am your mother, and you chose to betray me for her. Perhaps you need to reevaluate what the word love truly means, Marcus, because love is not about taking, it is about protecting. And you failed to protect me from her and from yourself. I walked back to the coffee table and picked up the manila envelope. These documents are still valid. The amended will is still in effect. The option to file a police report for grand theft auto remains open for 1 full year. For now, I will do nothing, but I want you to consider this a sword hanging over your head. A permanent reminder that your actions have consequences. He stood up, his posture that of a defeated man. Thank you, Mom. Thank you for not calling the police, for giving me another chance. Do not thank me yet, I warned him. This is your only chance. If you ever disrespect me again, if you ever treat me as anything less than a capable, intelligent human being, I will not hesitate. I will use these documents, and I will hold you legally accountable. Is that understood? He nodded fervently. Yes, I understand. I promise. It will never happen again. There is one more thing, I added. You will start therapy. Individual therapy, not couples counseling. You need to understand why you did this, why you allowed your wife to convince you to treat your own mother with such cruelty. You need to find your backbone before you can ever hope to be a good son or a good man. I'll do it, he said without hesitation. I'll find a therapist tomorrow. Good, I replied. And until you have attended at least 6 sessions, until I see a genuine, sustained change in your behavior, our relationship will be limited. You are not welcome in this house. He took a hesitant step toward me, his arms slightly outstretched, as if to attempt an embrace. I took a sharp step back. Not yet, I said, my voice softening for the first time, a note of sorrow creeping in. I need time, Marcus. I need to heal from what you did today. And you need to prove to me, with actions, not with pleading words, that you are the man I thought I raised. He dropped his arms to his sides, his eyes filled with a fresh wave of pain. I understand, he whispered. I picked up my keys from the table, their weight familiar and reassuring in my palm. These are mine, I said, my voice strong again. This car is mine. This house is mine. And my life is mine. And no one will ever take any of that from me again. I walked to the front door and opened it. I think it is time for you to leave. He walked past me and paused on the threshold. Mom, he said, turning back, his face a portrait of desperation. I really do love you. I looked him straight in the eye. I want to believe that, Marcus. But love without respect is a meaningless word. Show me respect, and then, maybe, we can begin to rebuild what you shattered today. He nodded, turned, and walked away. I watched as he walked down the street to where a taxi was waiting, one he must have called on his long, shameful drive home. As he got in, he looked back at me one last time, his face a mask of utter desolation. A part of me, the mother in me, wanted to run to him, to hold him, to say it was all okay, but I didn't. I had forgiven too much for too long. Forgiveness had become an invitation for more abuse. This time, the boundary would hold. I closed the door, leaned against it, and for the first time all day, I took a full, deep breath. I had won. But dear God, what a terrible, lonely victory it was. The days that followed were quiet, but it was a different kind of quiet from the one that had haunted me before. The predatory silence was gone, replaced by a stillness that felt like a held breath, a space for healing. I did not hear from Marcus. No calls, no texts. A part of me, the part that was still a mother, felt a pang of fear. I wondered if Tiffany had delivered her ultimatum, if Marcus had been forced to choose and had chosen his wife over his mother. The thought was a painful one, but it no longer had the power to shatter me. I had drawn my line in the sand. I had defended my home, my property, and my dignity. The next move was his, and I knew that if he chose to walk away, I would have to find a way to live with that. I had to believe that a life lived with dignity, even if it was a lonelier one, was better than a life of tolerated disrespect. Instead of waiting by the phone, I decided to focus on myself. I called my dear friend, Serena Jenkins. Her husband had passed away 5 years prior, and she had navigated the treacherous waters of widowhood with a grace and strength I deeply admired. I told her everything. The story poured out of me: the car, the betrayal, the documents, the confrontation. She listened patiently, without interruption, and when I was finished, there was no judgment in her voice, only fierce pride. "Eleanor Vance," she said, her voice ringing with conviction, "you did exactly the right thing. I am so proud of you. Being a mother does not mean being a martyr." Her words were a validation I didn't know how desperately I needed. A quiet voice in the back of my mind had been whispering that I had been too harsh, too unforgiving. Serena silenced that voice. She reminded me that self-respect is not a sin. We met for lunch the next day. Seeing her warm, smiling face felt like coming home. "Look at you," she said, taking both my hands in hers across the table. "There's a new light in your eyes." We talked for hours, not just about Marcus, but about the future, about the lives we still had left to live. "You have to promise me something, Ellie," she said, her expression serious. "Promise me you will not let this stop you. That car wasn't just a car. It was a promise you made to yourself. You need to keep it." And then she asked a question that startled me. "What is one thing you and Arthur always wanted to do but never got the chance?" I thought for a moment, a bittersweet memory surfacing. "We always talked about driving to the coast," I said softly, "to see the sunrise over the ocean, but there was always a reason not to. Work, Marcus's school, saving money. We always said someday." Serena's eyes lit up. "Then that's what you're going to do," she declared. "This weekend. You are going to get in your beautiful silver car, and you are going to drive to the coast and watch that sunrise for yourself." The idea was both terrifying and exhilarating. To travel alone? To stay in a hotel by myself? But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that Serena was right. It was exactly what I needed, a pilgrimage for one. That evening, I received a text message. It was from Marcus. My heart beat a little faster as I opened it. The message said, "Mom, I know you asked for space, and I am trying to respect that, but I wanted you to know that I had my first session with a therapist today. It was one of the hardest things I have ever done. I am working on myself. I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know I am trying. I love you." I read the message 3 times. A part of me wanted to reply immediately, to offer a word of encouragement, but the new, wiser part of me knew that words were not enough. Not yet. So I put the phone down and began to pack a small bag for my trip to the coast. The drive on Friday was a revelation. With each mile that passed, I felt the weight of the last few months begin to lift. The car my starlight handled beautifully, the engine a quiet hum of promise. It was no longer just a symbol of a battle won. It was the very instrument of my liberation. I arrived at the small seaside hotel in the late afternoon and checked into my room. When I walked onto the balcony, the view stole my breath away. The ocean stretched out before me, a vast expanse of shimmering blue-green, meeting the horizon in a seamless line. The sound of the waves crashing on the shore was a soothing, eternal rhythm. That night, I ate dinner alone in a small cafe, and I did not feel lonely. I felt peaceful. I felt complete. I woke before the dawn, my alarm set for 5 in the morning. I dressed warmly and walked out onto the deserted beach. The sand was cool beneath my feet, and the air was crisp with the salty tang of the sea. I found a spot and sat, my arms wrapped around my knees, and I waited. And then it began. The sky slowly transformed, shifting from inky black to a deep, velvety violet, then blushing with streaks of rose and fiery orange. Finally, the sun itself breached the horizon, a magnificent, blazing sphere of light that set the water on fire. It was the most beautiful, hopeful thing I had ever witnessed. Tears streamed down my face, But they were not tears of sorrow or of anger. They were tears of profound gratitude. For my life, for Arthur's love, for my own resilience, for this second chance. In the quiet light of that new day, I took out my phone. First, I sent a picture of the sunrise to Serena. Then, I opened my messages with Marcus. I looked at the text he had sent, and I typed my reply. Marcus, I am at the coast. I came to watch the sunrise, something your father and I always planned to do. As I sat here this morning, I realized something. I forgive you. Not because what you did was acceptable, but because I am choosing to release the anger. It is a weight I no longer wish to carry. But you must understand that forgiveness and trust are two different things. Our relationship has been fundamentally changed. If it is to be rebuilt, it will take time, and it will require you to show me, through consistent action, that you have truly changed. In the meantime, I will be living my life. I will be finding my own joy, because I have learned that I deserve it. I love you, but I love myself now too, and that is a boundary I will never allow to be crossed again. I hit send and felt a final, definitive weight lift from my soul. I did not know what the future held for Marcus and me, but I knew that whatever happened, I would be all right, because I was no longer a supporting character in someone else's story. I was the protagonist in my own. My son had taken my car, thinking I was a weak, foolish old woman. But what he found in that glove box was not just a set of legal documents, it was a declaration of independence. It was the truth that his mother was stronger than he had ever imagined. The real justice was not in the threat of a lawsuit or a call to the police. It was in the quiet, unshakable dignity I had reclaimed. It was in the gentle purr of my car's engine as I drove home that afternoon, the sun on my face and the open road ahead of me, a road leading to a future that was entirely, wonderfully, my own.